Welcome to Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing. What if you could learn from experienced real estate investors, find out what got them to where they are now, get insight into their daily habits, and take these insights to inspire your own growth? Each week, Jonathan Green shares an in-depth look at the mindful approach to real estate investing. Jonathan is a lifelong real estate investor, advisor, and coach, as well as the founder and team leader of Streamlined Properties. Whether you're looking to start from scratch, get to the next level, or just for a straightforward and honest approach to real estate investing, Jonathan seeks to provide a free mentorship program you can take with you anywhere. Now, here's Jonathan.
Thanks for showing up for another episode of Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing. We've got a great episode for you with Whitney Elkins-Hutten. She bought her first rental property in 2002, and now she is partnering over $800 million in real estate assets. But her real passion, as you're about to find out, is helping others simplify their wealth-building journeys. Let's go. This is episode 223 of Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing with my guest, Whitney Elkins-Hutten. Whitney is a former healthcare professional turned real estate investor as of 2002. She's a passive income strategist dedicated to helping busy professionals achieve financial freedom and build lasting wealth. Her company is Ash Wealth. She's also on the team at passiveinvesting.com. Whitney, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me on, Jonathan. This is going to be fun.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk to you. I saw your presentation at BPCon in Cancun. I got a lot of info out of it. So I want to start with something that I learned there. You're a big proponent of diversity in investing. Where did that come from and why is it so important, especially in this real estate investing field?
Ooh, well, it is a concept that I think, anybody who's in, the FIRE community or even getting into real estate learns. But I think for me, I really learned the lesson probably for the fourth time this past couple of years.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. Let's talk about that. Yeah.
Well, okay. So, everybody says, diversify your assets. So, if we're talking about stocks, bonds, and mutual fund investing, you're going to have your growth stocks, your dividend paying stocks. You're going to have maybe national, international, you're going to have equity versus bonds. In real estate, we used to say you're going to have to diversify across operators, markets, and deals. If you're investing passively, you're going to have to diversify between multifamily and other uncorrelated assets like self-storage, mobile home parks, right? Assisted living centers. I'm just throwing out some ideas.
Yeah.
What are we missing here? When you have a market that we've been in the last 2 years where everything's affected by interest rates, what happens to an equity deal? So if you're, let's say, where this is a real estate podcast, let's say you're a passive investor, because I've heard this story hundreds of times. You diversified across operator, market, and deal like you were supposed to. You got into 5 different uncorrelated asset classes like you were told to, and then all of your deals struggle.
Yeah.
You didn't diversify. What happened there? You didn't diversify across the capital stack.
Interesting.
So the different layers of money. And so again, like I said, I think you have to learn this lesson for 4 or 5 times before you kind of get it. This is why seasoned investors become really seasoned is because it's not because they were smart and they learned the lesson the first time. It's just that they were put in a situation and forced to learn the lesson multiple times. Yeah. And for me, this last time was, hey, listen, I can have that and, the first or second layer of diversification. But if I want to survive a recession, I need to have a debt layer, a note layer to my portfolio that's going to throw off passive income, stabilize cash flow whenever my equity investments are struggling.
Yeah, that's a fantastic point. And I have as well learned that lesson over 40 years of playing around and 30 years of active as an adult. And I think it's just so smart because people don't think of that, especially new people, because new people don't think, hey, the first thing I want to do is invest in some debt funds. But they don't understand the cycles when you haven't gone through them. And also real estate's so kind of exciting and flashy, those things that the things that we're talking about that balance it out now, not flashy at all. You're not going to see a bunch of TikTok videos on debt, and if they are, probably nobody's watching them. They're watching the ones where somebody invests in a multifamily and ended up with a Ferrari or something, right? Which again is again the extension of the FIRE movement, which is, of course we can debate for a long time. But how did you go through, again, like you said, for the fourth time and figure out like, ooh, this is the thing that I missed? Is it because the rates have just stayed so high that it's made those type of assets stagnant or non-performing?
Well, and again, I think every time you learn the lesson, it's kind of like reading a book, your favorite book, over and over and over again. Like every time you read it, you're picking up something new. Like for me, one of my favorite books is The One Thing by Gary Keller and Jay Papasan.
Yeah, one of my faves.
Every time I read it, I'm like, what? How did I miss that?
Yeah.
And so, for this particular market situation, actually leading into it in about 2019, I was on a private capital team. We were a private equity team. We're looking at deals, and, the adjustable rate mortgages that we were looking to partner on deals on just didn't really make sense.
Yeah.
And we had an underwriter on our team that was like, hey, listen, guys, I know this gives cash flow. If we can get a good deal, I get it. But he was like, have you penciled this out? Like if interest rates go up to 7, 8, 9%. And he was like, it'll be a complete disaster.
Yeah.
And, my partners were like, will that really happen? And, this is before COVID, before a black swan event happens. And we get off a couple calls that are pretty heated. And then I call him and I'm like, walk me through the numbers. And he showed me, and the rates didn't have to get up to 7, 8, 9%. They only had to get up to 6%. And we were kind of hosed. And so for me, that was like, oh, wait, hold on. I'm in all equity.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if all the deals that I'm looking at right now, are taking on, this adjustable rate mortgage in order for the cash flow to work, where am I to put my money? I'm like, I'm going to have to pause. So I paused investing about 2 years early. Now, I would love to say I'm super smart and that I haven't gotten bitten by, any of the deals and, that I haven't gotten caught up in this whole situation. No, I have a couple 1031s that went into adjustable rate mortgages and, we're working through it. But right then, that's when I was like, okay, I got to start looking at debt. And like you were saying earlier, Jonathan, that's not sexy, especially whenever you've been looking down at, 17, 18% IRR. You've been flipping out of deals in 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
I'm sitting here going, I'm going to get 6% preferred return. That's
But that's the interesting thing about investing and the kind of widespread social media production of content that talks about investing, because if you read The Millionaire Next Door, it's all just boring stuff. I got one rental, then I got one the next year. It's not flashy like what it's proposed to be. But to your point about debt, I remember I had Brian Burke on, who of course from Bigger Pockets and his great book, The Hands-Off Investor. I had him on a long time ago, I think it was in 2023, and it was the rates were up, and he was saying I'm not even really buying this year. I'm interested in debt. And that, just for what you're saying to me, that was the first time I was like, wait a second. This is starting to make sense to me, like equity versus debt. But as we're both saying, there's just nothing out there that someone's going to be like, I can't wait to just look into a debt fund, and now there's mezzanine debt and there's all these options that are really creative. But I think it's a really great point, and it's a great starting point for us because it's just not something that enough people are talking about it. I think a few in the know are, and of course, people who have big portfolios are making smart moves to average out of some bad debt multifamily. But this isn't the thing that TikTok is made of, right?
But if you do the math, I don't know if you've ever done this. If you invested $100,000 in a Roth IRA and you were able to do that year over year, okay, which is a little hard. I mean, you would probably have to have your own business or some sort of equity building with the IRA. But not even out. We can take it outside of an IRA too. You can get equity and you allow it to compound for just 7 years. That can start kicking off $100,000 a month or in annual cash flow. I mean, you can get an equity-like return. You just have to be extremely disciplined about it. And you have to allow it to compound. You have to give it a runway.
And I mean, especially based on your background, you can't get scared, because I learned a bad lesson in 2008. I was fortunate on the real estate thing, but I had so much money in stocks then that I just got panicked. So I took it all. I just left it in cash for years, and I lost so much money by just being scared. So now I have a ton in index funds as a diversifying protector, but I tell myself I don't need that money. So I don't have to sell it out. So even if we are going to go down for a year, I know that means they're going to be repurposing buying well, so it's going to go back up. And this is the way that I think we need to start look about real estate as a whole, as we're saying. It's like there's a lot of different options, but we were always focused on, hey, like you're saying, multi, self-storage. Maybe I need some light industrial to balance this out. But that formula is all based on the same rates. It's not like you go to self-storage and it's a 3.7 and, industrial flex is a 6 rate. It just doesn't work like that. The rates are all around the same.
Mm-hmm. Well, and, those different sectors cycle may be slightly different from each other.
Yeah.
You get this illusion that you have, hedges within your portfolio, but, multifamily has, gotten beaten up for the past couple of years. Self-storage was only about 12 months behind it. Self-storage struggled.
Yeah.
In certain areas of the United States, industrial is struggling, and office and retail. So these things cycle, a little bit asynchronously, but, when you have that same underlying issue in all of those deals, it's just a matter of time before, you're going to struggle there. But I love, you and I are on the same page. Build up that debt side of the portfolio that helps smooth the ride a little bit. Yes, it's not as sexy and it might take a little bit longer to get there, but boy, you are going to be so happy when the next recession hits. It's not a matter of if, guys, it's a matter of when.
Yeah.
You're going to have a part of your portfolio that will truly be uncorrelated from the other side of the portfolio.
Yeah. And I mean, I've also learned last year, I finally started investing in syndications for myself after years of just generally being, more of a participant in everything. And the first thing that I was really focused on was the debt. Because I knew by having so many syndicators on the show, I was like, okay, let me just focus on operator first and then the debt. And all the ones that I invested in, none had, adjustable debt. It was all fixed rate debt for a term that I felt comfortable with. So even if they're not performing at max capacity now, those aren't the syndications that are failing. The majority of syndication failures were because of this either, hybrid debt, bridge loans, things like that were short term that couldn't, like you said, sustain when rates went from, 5 to 8, that whole thing's in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it's going to be an interesting thing, but I want to go back because for you, why did you pivot or get into real estate in 2002? Because now you've created all sorts of diversified income, but what led you to real estate in the first place with your background?
Completely by accident. I bought a house with a significant other, and about a month later, the relationship fell apart, and I was the one that was able to qualify to get the mortgage. And so everything was under my name.
Yeah.
However, it was my realtor had put the book Rich Dad, Poor Dad in my hands.
Interesting.
And I skimmed it. I read the first 2 chapters. I'm like, got it. Buy real estate. That's what we're doing, guys. We're buying a house. And then I kind of skimmed it and put it down. I was a bad student, a really bad student.
Yeah.
And so, get this house. I'm 103% financed. The relationship falls apart, and, he was the one that was going to be doing the rehab on the entire property. So when, the relationship falls apart, he moves out. I'm sitting here with green shag carpets, psychedelic daisies painted all over the walls, half the kitchen's repped out, drywall everywhere, like no flooring.
Yeah. Welcome home.
The whole one room.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is a nightmare. I'm a pretty scrappy person, and my dad at the time was still alive. And so, he was able to, he was in poor health, but if he could have come out and helped me put that house back together, he would have loved to do that.
Yeah.
But anyways, just stuffed it full of roommates who didn't mind living in a construction zone. I actually brought in one roommate that was a friend of mine that I gave him a half price, half 50% break on the rent because I was like, can you paint and do flooring?
Yeah.
Because you can, cool. But 11 months later, I got the property put back together, did a lot of things that I think I shouldn't have been doing, like electrical and plumbing.
Yeah.
I had the Home Depot 1, 2, 3 book. I don't know. They still sell it.
I have it. It's like in under something now, but I remember getting that like 20 years ago as well.
Oh gosh. We still look at it.
Yeah.
Now you have YouTube. I mean, I tried to tell my daughter these stories and she was like, why didn't you just look up the video on YouTube? And I'm
like, we didn't even have the internet. That's me when I was a kid. They're like, how did you know how to do stuff? I'm like, I don't know. My dad told me. There was no internet. I didn't know what I was doing.
You looked it up. There were some things you broke and you didn't get it back together.
Right. You're like, I looked in a newspaper. Kids are like, what's that? I'm like, exactly right. My point. Yeah. It's really interesting though, because across all these episodes, what I've learned from a lot of people is their first investment is either an accident, something they fell into. But the most interesting thing to me is that everybody seems to find a way to figure it out before there was a terminology for really what house flipping was or what house hacking was and all the varieties. It's like people, like you said, were just scrappy and they're like, okay, I own this. I have extra rooms. Let me get some roommates. People have been doing this for hundreds of years. It's just smart. It didn't have an acronym then that worked. But when you did that and then you
preservation is what it was.
Yeah. But when you got to that 11 months and you kind of figured it out, did you think at that point, hey, real estate's for me? Or were you like, no, I'm not ready yet? Because another thing that you said that's so interesting is I always find that rich dad, poor dad comes to you at the right times. There's always a time when someone gives it to you and you're like, yeah, that's okay. Great. But then it comes back and you're like, wait, maybe that book was really good. Maybe I should keep going. Did that happen?
Oh yeah, totally. So, okay, I'll continue the story. So 11 months in, I'm like, thank goodness I'm selling this property. I'm getting out from underneath it. A couple of weeks later, I'm putting together all the paperwork for taxes because I sold it in March. And, granted, this is for the following tax year, but I was like, everything's still fresh in my head. Pull everything together. I'm like, whoa, hold on. Okay, I got $52,000 at the closing table. I didn't have any of my initial money in the deal. I borrowed $7,000 from my grandfather who cashed out a CD that probably was earning 15%. We talk about love because I paid him back 8. The guy lost.
Yeah. Hey, family,
family,
family money. Yeah.
But the funny thing is, this was, I kind of had not a poor granddad, rich granddad, but I had one that was savvier with money and one less savvier with money. Yeah. My savvy grandfather was like, no, I'm not lending you the money. Right. The other one was like, sure, I'll give you the money.
Yeah.
Anyways, so he's all paid off. All my expenses are paid off. And I realized that I had zero of my own money in the deal. I was making $300 to $400 a month. And I made a $52,000 check. I was like, whoa, how many more times can I do this?
Right.
So I thought I had it all figured out. Remember, I haven't finished the book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I go buy a mountain property because I want to live there. Yeah. Because I got it figured out, right? So I go buy this mountain property, move in, think I can do the exact same thing. Roommates, not so good. Very challenging roommates, very challenging property to work with. And whenever I go to sell it, it takes me over a year to sell the property. And I broke even. It was not a complete disaster, but I had violated every mutable law of real estate. And when I went back about 6 months into trying to sell the property, I went back and reread Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I'm like, what did I miss? This guy said real estate was it. Yeah. And then that's when I realized location. Okay, well, I had a house in a challenging market. I was in a retirement-ish type market, and I bought a property that was built into the side of a hill that was 5 miles outside of town that had 19 steps from the driveway to the porch.
Great exercise if you had a Fitbit at the time. I mean,
my target audience couldn't even make it halfway up to the steps.
Yeah.
To even look at the property. I mean, I had so many showings that canceled because the people were so out of breath walking up the steps. And I was like, all right. So finally got that sold to a young couple. It was a miracle. It was total miracle how it got sold. It was a total disaster how it got sold. And that's the story that sometimes people hear. That was the one where the bus fell into the roof of the property 24 hours after closing.
Okay.
It wasn't my fault. It was actually the seller or the buyer's fault because they forced me to repair a retaining wall behind the property.
Yeah.
And they wanted to use all their own contractors and everything. We get it all paid off. And I was just like, you know what the problem is? My neighbor has a tenant living in a bus that's sitting on top of the retaining wall. That bus moves back in on top of the retaining wall. It's going to break again.
Yeah.
Sure enough, this bomb-proof wall, they moved the bus back into the into position 24 hours after closing because I put a clause in the contract saying it couldn't be moved back.
Yeah.
And I toppled into the roof of the house. That's always a fun phone call to get from your realtor the following day. And you can hear like a shotgun being pumped and a lot of people yelling.
It is a plus that closed was before that, though. That's a good one. But I think something that you said was interesting to me because it was the fact that you read the beginning of Rich Dad Poor Dad and then just put it down and then came back to it. But I feel like that kind of is a commentary on what people are seeing now. They're seeing 60-second clips of people talking about it. They're like, oh, I got it. Yeah, they just told me, like, get self-storage. So I'll just go get self-storage. And they're not doing the whole due diligence, or they only read a book, or they only hear this podcast, and then they don't talk to other real life real estate investors who are like, well, that is a good framework. However, in real life, it doesn't always work like that. Have you found that these are the things that you really find out over time, especially based on this experience?
I have a love-hate relationship with social media for that very reason.
Too.
And, as a public figure, I kind of have to be on social media.
Yeah.
But it is hard for me to put out that type of content in Reels. And then, because I know somebody is going to go take action based on that like little 90-second worth of information.
Yeah.
And, I'm constantly saying it all depends. And I get pushback all the time. They were like, why can't you speak clearly and directly? And I'm like, because it really depends. It depends on your
90 seconds.
It's 90 seconds, guys. Like we spend our whole lives going through school and learning lessons, and we're still going to make mistakes.
Yeah.
So, no, I 100% agree with you. And the environment in the game is always changing. I would like to, I always tell my coaching clients, even my child, I was like, I'm going to teach you and give you the keys to the kingdom. I'm going to teach you everything that I know. And it's not because I don't want you to make any mistakes, because I can't promise that. You're going to go make your own.
Yeah.
It's just like, hopefully you learn from mine.
But that's important, though, because I think, it's the same thing as we were just talking about. I mean, when you close on a house just as a regular home buyer, you're like, great, it's done. And then immediately in the first month, $15,000 of cost comes for everyone, everywhere. It doesn't matter, sewer breaks, furnace breaks. It's not always somebody's fault. It's just that houses have a life cycle of their own. And these things happen. So any deal, like you said, you can come up with and think it's perfect. Something always happens. I mean, that's why you have to be kind of resilient to be successful in real estate and open to the possibility that it can't always fit this like rigid plan.
Reserves, lots of reserves. Even if you're a passive investor, set aside reserves. Yeah. That's a huge lesson that I think a lot of passive investors learned. I mean, we always talk about setting aside reserves for our own personal situation.
Yeah.
You have income coming in just from a job. What do they say? Set aside, 3, 6 to 12 months worth of reserves.
Yep.
Well, if your only streams of income coming from your passive investments, set aside reserves.
Yeah.
Right. Not only to compensate for the cash flow if it becomes compressed or stalls, but capital calls do happen. And like you said, you can close on the property and immediately have to replace like the sewer line and put on a roof.
Yeah.
That's a capital call.
Yeah, of your own that you
of your
don't
own
want.
Capital.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I always, of course, like in the forums and stuff, I see people talking about like taking a HELOC. And the first thing I say is whatever you take, just only take half that you have available to start with. So leave the other half alone so you don't bottom yourself out. And that's a reserves question. Same as when someone says, I have $50,000 to invest. I say, you don't. You have $35,000 to invest. You have $15,000 that you need to put aside for reserves, because how many stories have you heard over the day that, just like we said, they closed, you have a rental property, and then all of a sudden the furnace for one unit is out. And they're like, well, that's $7,000. Well, I wasn't planning on $7,000. Well, where was your reserve fund? Well, nobody told me about that. But houses don't stay perfect.
You're looking at Instagram clips.
Yeah, right. But it is. I mean, it's a different model than, again, I grew up with a dad who was telling me everything that I just assumed was correct, but he also showed me it in the field. And here it's like, I don't even know that what people are showing me might not be real. Could be AI, could be fake. The documents, the numbers could always be wrong, which always is curious for me when people spend so much time, quote, running deals when they haven't seen them in person. I'm like, how do you know those numbers are correct? Because you saw it on Zillow. That doesn't mean those numbers are correct. You don't even have pictures of a basement. I mean, it's just you can see so much more, but you can be tricked so much more now.
Mm-hmm. Well, when I bought property, when I was buying single family homes in Indianapolis and Kansas City, a large part of those deals I didn't see like personally myself, but I had
Yeah.
systems in place, and it was a trust but verify, right? I had
Right.
systems in
Yeah.
place, and I'd always get a third uninterested party
Yeah.
to go walk the
Great point.
property,
Yep.
take a video, and I would never have them do pictures because I wanted them to take video and walk around
360.
and, like, 360 the room. And I'll be like, what is that?
Yeah.
Oh, it's a little black spot on the wall. And I'm like, it's below a window.
It's mold.
It's mold.
Yeah. Yeah. That is really important though, because people say, I mean, just look online. I always say there's no pictures of the basement. There's no pictures of the exterior. You don't know how the foundation is. Like, I mean, these are the things where the costs are. There's no costs in an upgraded kitchen. You can see it's been upgraded, but maybe they didn't have permits. Did you pull an Oprah? Do you know what's going on? And these are the advanced things that, again, that are kind of boring, like our hay notes and debt type of investing. But those are the things that cost you money later on that I think people are probably missing because it's, again, not as exciting.
Mm-hmm. Well, even on passive deals, just think about it. I mean, I'm not saying go look at every single one of the deals that you are investing with an operator, but if it's a new operator, can maybe get a couple addresses and go check it out, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Just make, feel, touch, make sure what they're showing you, if it's a current deal or a past deal, matches what's, you can do anything with pictures.
Yeah.
I remember doing that with the first few deals that I was raising money for. Like we had a team that would go, do the walkthrough and everything like that. I would actually go fly to the property. I'm like, that's the least we can do, is, even if we're just, helping, assisting in the capital raise or a co-GP on the deal. And I'm like, we need to go out and we need to walk the grounds, and you get so much more information by touching and feeling. Yeah. And to be quite honest, if you're going to write a $100,000 check as a passive investor with a new operator, spending $600 on a plane ticket one day and maybe $600 on a lawyer, that is peanuts.
Yeah. Because technology is awesome. But you can look on Google Maps and see what's there, and that's could be 2 years behind. And you just may look at that. You may not go down one block, keep going to the next block and really circle around what's there to see if that really suits what they're saying. Is that area, as growth oriented as they said? Because it's just documents that you're looking at. And as we said, anything can look really good now. It's not hard to make something look attractive. Hey, it's Jonathan. I hope you're enjoying this episode with Whitney Elkins-Hutten. Now, you can find her at passiveinvesting.com and ashwealth.com. But if you're looking to grow a portfolio like Whitney's that gets up to these numbers that are tremendous, you might need cost segregation. So if you have one property, multiple properties, as long as they're investment properties, get in touch with my friend and a former guest on the show, Sean Graham of Maven Cost Segregation. You can use my special affiliate link at mavencostseg.com/green, and green has an E at the end. Let's get back to Whitney. So how did you, scale up what you were doing from doing that second one in the mountain and probably thinking maybe I should stop? Where did you go from there, and how did you go kind of bigger and bigger as you went?
Yeah. So by this time with that mountain property, I'd met my husband and we were together and finally got out from underneath that property. And then he was like, okay, what are you going to do next? And I'm like, I'm going to go buy another piece of real estate. He was like, you are crazy. I was like, I got it figured out, right? I actually finished the book by now.
Yeah. Right.
I've taken really 2 hard lumps. And trust me, I learned so much more from the School of Hard Knocks than I probably ever would if I'd never gotten started.
Yeah.
And then, we did a couple condos together, and then we eventually did a couple houses together. We actually I call it it's now our 14-year flip. We are living in our last flip that we never moved out of because we love the area so much. Yeah. But long story short, we started doing this together, and then we kind of hit a ceiling of achievement because we were really good at bringing in equity, but really bad at the cash flow piece. I was like, how are people paying their bills? And then finally, one of our friends one day was like, why don't you keep one of those properties and put a tenant in it? And I'm like, you're a genius. I mean, it's kind of like, I can only imagine like the Indians, whenever somebody touched their forehead and said, that's a ship that's coming towards your shore. Like, you know, and that, like in the Indies, they weren't even Indians, right? Like, I can only imagine that's what they felt. They were like, oh, you know, the light bulb comes on. So started doing rental real estate in my own backyard in Colorado. Picked up a pretty good property on a Christmas Eve. I think this is like 2016, maybe. Had trouble getting more property after that. Discover bigger pockets, discover what cash flow actually truly is. Yeah. And I was like, that's it. We're going on a market. Started picking up property in Indianapolis and Kansas City. And then the gloves were kind of off by then. I got really focused there, scaled up to 40 single family rentals, actually 38 out of state. We still had a couple here in Colorado. And that's when I hit my next ceiling of achievement, because the income that I'm bringing in is quote unquote passive. However, it's still a very active activity. I'm in charge of sourcing all the deals, finding all the lending, you know, hiring the property manager, managing the property manager, making the larger decisions. You know, it's really hard for them they're going to make decisions about paint, carpet, and flooring and turning tenants and all that. But when you have a break-in, I got to handle all the insurance claims.
Yeah. And it's not like all 40 are within, you know, a mile of each other. They're spread out. So your management costs get bigger and bigger, you know, as you have them. I mean, great if they're in two areas, but they're still not all right next to each other. Yeah.
And I was doing BRRRR investing. So I was managing, you know, construction rehab timelines at the same time. Yeah. And so every property, if you think about it, has at least two loans on it. They had that purchase loan with the bridge debt on it. And then I had to refinance it out into the permanent debt. So it was a lot of moving parts. Yeah. Finally got the portfolio somewhat stabilized and, you know, calculated my return on equity. And I'm like, well, what am I doing? Like, I recalculated my return on my equity and my return on my time. And then I had already started doing some passive investing on the side. And I was like, wait a second. I'm making $300 or $400 an hour. Cool. Yeah. Doing this active style of investing. I'm making thousands of dollars an hour over here, you know, as return on my time. And I had other things that I wanted to do. I mean, I'm a parent. It was very lucky because all these decisions came right before COVID. Had I not made the decision to start transitioning full-time into real estate and transitioning my portfolio, I think I would have been in a real world of hurt whenever COVID came down. Yeah. And then I have a 7-year-old at home that I have to homeschool.
Yeah. Fun times for them too. Everyone's like, oh, it's great. They're out of school. No, just try it. My daughter was in high school. Her last 2 years of high school were during the pandemic, and she went a total of twice to school. So yeah, it was a long couple of years.
I mean, it ended up being a good move for our daughter and actually a good move for our family. We traveled quite a bit during that time. Yeah. And so we were able to school from the road. We got systems in place for that. But, you know, she's back in school now. We're actually, you know, everybody said, you know, is like, are you mourning this? And I'm like, no, I'm not. Like, she's happy. She's around friends. Yeah. You know, she's in a really great charter school. We're happy. We've got this nice routine, but we have learned to push back against our school. Like, they didn't want us taking her out for us to go to Sedona like we usually do in the winter. And I was like, guys, she's already proven for 5 years that she can do school from home. Yeah. And like, so we got, you know, an excused absence for the month of December and went down to Sedona again. So we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, nice. Well, it's interesting though. I mean, I've talked to a lot of people who did scale up with single families and then realized it's kind of fragmented management. Did you go straight into investing in syndications, or did you build your own at that point? Because that's really a decision that a lot of people make on what they want to do. And did you sell off all those properties in bulk or one by one?
I went into joint venture in a multifamily property, you know, because I was trying to think of what the next step would be. I was like, do I want to do multifamily passively? Do I want to do it actively? I said yes to both and did that. I actually decided that I needed to start investing in my education. And so I started going to conferences, and I actually met my 2 partners with the previous private equity firm that I helped scale at a conference, both females, shortest bathroom line possible. Like, there was 10 of us, 10 women. Yeah, right. The whole conference. Yeah. And so it was great. You know, we were able to scale pretty quickly in the private equity space. And so I raised on 29 deals, GP 10 multifamily deals. I don't know if you get this about me. Once I kind of get something, an idea in my head, I go.
Yeah.
And then I kind of figure out, I build the parachute, on the way down.
Until you reach the ceiling again. And then the ceiling got to change.
Yeah, I got to figure out how to move it. So I still have these 38, 40 single family rentals. And the reason why I bounce back and forth is because we actually bought one in 2020 after we sold off most of the portfolio, because we bought our retirement home that has 2 units on it. So the number, everybody's like, can you count? I'm like, yeah, I can.
Yeah.
But it depends what year we're talking about.
Yeah.
And remember, I've calculated my return on my time. I'm making moves to, solve that problem. I recalculated my return on my equity, and I'm like, I need to play some Monopoly here. And so I started with selling off the Indianapolis properties. I only had 4 Indianapolis properties. And I was like, let me eliminate this. It was actually my property manager sold to another group. And so great property management became horrible property management. I'm like, right now is the time in the market. Let me cash these out. Yes, this was 2020, like 2019, 2020. The market still had a ways to go.
Yeah.
But I didn't know that. So I cashed this out, redeploy the equity into some other projects. And then over the next few years, I sell off the Kansas City rentals in small packages or to the tenants.
Yeah.
Because that was, some of these were C-class properties, and that was like a great opportunity. I actually really loved working with the tenants to get them into a home. I wanted to figure out how to do that for them if it worked. Now, I didn't sell or carry anything. We would do creative financing for down payments and stuff like that. But I was exited fully out of those projects. And then I started taking in, this is about 2019. So I start getting some of this equity back, and I'm like, ooh, I need to build a debt layer to my portfolio.
Yeah. So you're ahead of the curve on that too, though, because it's now something that people weren't thinking as much about, but you were ahead thinking about it back then.
Yeah. And it was a little difficult because there was a lot of, I felt like, education on how to underwrite individual notes, but not a whole lot of education around how to underwrite debt funds.
Yeah.
And so I even did a little bit of stumbling around there. I mean, the one individual debt note that I did source, I lost money on. I was like, okay, that was too much work.
For that.
It was a medical office note in the middle of COVID that was trying to sell in the middle of COVID. Like it was bad timing, really bad timing. But yeah, so, I took a few lumps there, but really kind of got my systems in place. And I'm really glad that I did. But I was still investing in equity deals as well. But I was, if I got, $100,000 back, 75 went to debt, 25 went to an equity deal.
Yeah. Well, so now we're just into 2025 when we're recording this. If you have someone who comes to you either for coaching, maybe they have a little bit of experience, not a ton, but they're definitely looking to grow. What are you telling them to look at right now as an asset? Because we've gone from the beginning of our conversation, we've talked about equity versus debt. There's a lot of different properties. There's lots of different asset classes. Where should someone go in this environment where none of us really think we're going to have a great interest rate trade-off at some point? Like, we're not going to lose 2 points this year. No one is predicting that, so we're kind of in a stagnant phase where historically the rates make sense, but not to people who are new to this.
Mm-hmm. I will, just as an aside, when I was scaling my BRRRR properties, my carryout financing, I was, holding property at 7.5%. Money can be made in this market. So is it 3%, financing? No, but money, the people who figure it out and who are resilient and scrappy and resourceful, I think that's the word I'm looking for.
Yeah.
They're going to continue to scale their portfolios, and they're going to beat out everybody else that is scared by the headlines. Now, I'll answer the question directly. I think debt and debt-like instruments are kind of what's the market is giving us in this part of the cycle, the hypersupply into the recessionary part of the cycle. Yeah. Even slightly into the recovery part of the cycle, debt and debt-like instruments are still going to be king. Now, that all kind of comes with like an asterisk, because what I find with most passive investors, especially new to the space, is that they actually need to go sit with themselves and, think of their investor thesis. Like, what are their goals, their risks, their timeline? And those aren't 3 questions. I mean, if we really sit with that, that's probably 30 questions somewhere buried in there. They need predetermine some investment decisions up front and then go find the operator, the markets and deals that match that thesis.
Yeah.
And so it does make it turn passive investing into a more active activity initially.
On the front end.
On the front end, yes.
Yeah.
But I think that's how you're going to safeguard your wealth. I will say anytime that I really have scratched my head and wondered how that deal went sideways or south, my DNA was all over it. Is because I shortcutted my due diligence process somehow.
Yeah.
And so it's not to say that you could do everything right and still break even on a deal or even lose a little bit of money. I mean, those things still happen, but usually the ones that you're like, that was painful, is probably because you shortchanged yourself on a decision. You tried to skip a step for the sake of moving quickly.
Yeah. And I think when people confuse what is passive and what's not. We know that syndications are really passive. When you're an LP, you really have no control compared to people who are like, oh, rental properties are passive. No, I mean, if you have a manager, if you don't manage the manager, you're going to lose a ton of money. But I think they look at passive investing as like, oh, well, this is pretty easy. I just choose one. Here's their returns and I get it. But you still have to vet the operator, vet the deal. And I love what you said, because I think specific to those points you were talking about, the timeline of when you want money back is so important. It's a cash flow appreciation. What type of passive investing vehicle are you interested in? Because you could see something that looks cool as a passive investor and think like, wow, hotel conversion sounds awesome. I want to be involved in that. But you don't realize that you're not getting cash flow for like 18 months to 24 months on that. Whereas if you invest in a multifamily deal that's already stabilized, you're going to get a return. And so from a new person, they could look at passive investing or syndications as a whole and not realize like what we're saying in the beginning. No, there's so many different diversified types of assets and returns and timelines in there. Those are the things you want them to know as a passive investor up front, right?
Riches are in the niches. And so I will say I've made more money looking for base hits in passive deals than I have like for the promised home run, like the hotel conversion that's going to like 3x your money in 18 months.
I mean, that it's like a startup investing. If the best startup investors will tell you, you invest in 10 and if one hits, that's the windfall. But that's the point. 9 are failures. So you're basically batting 10, 100. But that succeeds if that one succeeds. So the more due diligence is, it's really important. I mean, again, this goes back to our boring and unsexy principle. Base hits are what win. All long-term investors who, are as old as I am have been doing this for years, and the base hits are the best. Steady, you know what you get, and it will steadily appreciate. Going back to what you said about compound interest as well. I mean, that's the kind of boring thing that you need.
Well, and I'll put it in a more tangible example for somebody who's like still does not believe us that debt is like a good investment right now. There's no way I can meet my retirement goals. Build yourself a calculator and look at, investing in debt, reinvesting your profits, adding to it every single year, allowing it to compound. And you will be astonished what that will turn into in like 10, 20, 30, 40 years. You invest $100,000 a year for 40 years, you're going to have $28 million.
Yeah. I mean, it goes back to the tiniest example that they always use is the penny. Would you take a penny today if it would multiply for 20 years, like each day? And then you have like, whatever, like $1 billion or something, or do you just want like $1 million? Everyone always takes $1 million and you're like, well, you're missing the point here, But again, it's because compound interest is boring because tomorrow it's just 2 cents. That doesn't seem. And then the next day it's 4. Like, when's this thing going to take off? Way down the road. Just leave it alone. That's how I think in my head of what I leave in index funds. I don't need that money. And just we were saying with reserves, everybody needs to have that type of parachute in all investments. And it was a great point that you made that even if you're investing in syndications, you still want to have a parachute for those, even if you trust them, because you need the parachute. You just never know. And you still want to be able to make a decision if there's a capital call, what you really want to do. Did you expect it? Could you have foreseen that? And like you're saying, are your fingerprints on that decision because you didn't do as much as you should have done? And I think that's a very, very important part of investing is self-awareness. Do you agree with that, especially as you go along further?
Oh, absolutely. And it's the things that you don't know that will kind of get you into trouble. But that could also, move a listener into fear. And so
Right.
you kind of have to, take a balanced approach. And so, if somebody's listening to this and they're starting out and like, how do I get started in passive investing? Go slow, you know, put together your investor thesis. I mean, I have tons of webinars on passive investing made simple, my YouTube channel, to help you with that.
Yeah.
Go slow, diversify, where you can. You don't have to write $100,000 check right out of the gate. I know that will optimize how much you pay in taxes, possibly less
Yeah.
K1s to deal with, but you're getting your education. Start with the minimum investment for your first 3, 4, 5 properties.
Yeah.
Get minimum investment, get to 10, investments. And then we can start talking about writing larger checks, maybe, taking additional, I don't want to say swinging for the fences. I hate saying that, but maybe we can, look at some deals that could be like a little bit, a double hit.
Yeah, well, I mean, more experience means more opportunities to take better educated risks. So the
There you
risk
go.
might be, initially higher if you were in the beginning, but now you've built up a risk tolerance that makes sense, and you're also able to mitigate the risk by your experience. So, like you said, maybe I am looking for what seems like a home run, but it's not, a startup home run. It's just something that's a new horizon that could build more, but you've set your expectations based on other outs. And also, the cool thing about syndications is when one goes full cycle, then you have the opportunity to 1031 then, and you have usually a double amount to put in at least. So you have that extra thing if you just, invest in 3 or 4 and then, let them marinate a little, see what happens.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. 1031 exchanges, you got it. Those also, need to be timed right as well.
Yeah, great point. People always they've asked me a lot about 1031 because I've been doing it so long. I've never completed a 1031. People think that that's crazy. We were going to do one, my sister and I, and we just felt like we're getting forced into these. I don't want these properties. They just, these are my 3 options. I don't like them. So we just didn't do it. I think it makes a lot of people make a choice that they maybe wouldn't have made.
100%
In a low inventory environment, you're in trouble. In the commercial space, if you have an intermediary in the 1031 space and they've already shown you what's available and I can 1031 into that, that's good. But things can still go wrong in the diligence phase and then you can't really get out of it, right? I mean, it's just it's a lot of pressure for me. I'd just rather, pay the taxes and figure it out.
Well, if you are selling and buying in the same year, you're resetting your basis and you're getting a new depreciation schedule. And so you're going to, I would imagine, wash 50% of your taxes anyways.
Yeah.
And if we get back to 100% bonus depreciation, maybe you're closer to depending on the asset, 70, 80, 90%. But I'm like you. I mean, I've owned over hundreds of properties and I think I've done 3 1031 exchanges.
It's just annoying to me. But it goes back to our diversification point too, because you talked a little bit about depreciation, or earlier you talked about cost seg. It's like if you have a diversified portfolio, you don't have to think, oh, I have to 1031 everything because, hey, you have this, I did a cost seg on this, so I'm going to get depreciation on that. And you can kind of mix and match in the years what you want to use to balance it out the right way. And that's really diversified portfolios, with a lot of different options. So you give yourself taxable options that are all legal, with a good real estate accountant who understands what to do.
Yeah. I bought 2 properties in 2020. No, one in 2020, one in 2021. I actually didn't know I was buying the property in 2021. I did a cost seg on the one in 2020 in 2021 because I needed the losses.
Right.
And then I did the cost seg on the one I bought in 2021 in 2023 because I needed the losses. So you don't have to do the cost seg the first year. I think it's kind of, I don't know, for me, mentally easier. But, if you don't want to pay for it, if it's going to be super expensive, but you need to wait until the year that you need the losses, you can do that too.
Yeah. Great point. So to sum it up, though, I mean, somebody, in this environment, based on what you say and what I say for sure, wouldn't you just advise people to just stay in the game? Keep your head, keep learning, keep meeting other investors and doing your due diligence. You don't have, taking action to me isn't buying. Taking action is staying in the game, going to meetups, going on webinars and learning. Don't you find that that's a better way to give people advice than this, like, you got to buy now. The only way to take action is to buy, because then you feel just like we were saying with 1031. Oh, well, my FOMO is telling me to buy, but the deal is terrible.
Mm-hmm. I think those are great activities to be involved in. I think everybody listening to this podcast could probably benefit by going back and taking action and looking at their own personal portfolio and financial foundation and making sure that you're in a rock solid, fortress position.
Yeah,
and
I love that. Yeah.
The blueprint that I provide in Money for Tomorrow. And so, Money for Tomorrow, originally Bigger Pockets wanted me to write the book for the newer investor. But when I gave it to them, they were like, whoa, this is actually for anybody, like even seasoned investors. I'm like, I know. Do you know how many seasoned investors with $20 million that I coach that, aren't doing the basics when it comes to managing their finances or, optimizing their debt structures or their taxes? Dave Ramsey and Susie Orderman are amazing to help you keep like hundreds or thousands of dollars in your pocket. But I'm talking about ways that you can keep tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars in your pocket.
Yeah.
This is a great time to make sure that you have all of that solid financial foundation built. And even if you did have it built, go back and revisit that you haven't let things slip, that you don't have the lifestyle creep coming in, that you didn't kind of take your pedal off the metal somewhere along the line.
Yeah, I'd take that. So I've used that model specific to properties. I wrote an article on the Bigger Pockets blog about this. And it was, if you have 5 properties or more, you should be going through an optimization process, like you're saying, finances, but of the properties, because anyone who owns 5 properties, one is usually just garbage. You got it because you were trying to accumulate so fast in this doors culture. And if you just kind of rank them in these categories and see which one comes up last, that might be a good sale. And as we were saying before, maybe you don't make money on it. That's okay. You get back the down payment and you repurpose it into something better of an asset. But if you're not looking at all of the properties that you own and your finances and your debt on them and understanding this one is really of no use to me. Someone else maybe wants to do something else, but it's dragging the rest of my portfolio down. It's just a great tip on both ends to be focused on the financing and every year really be optimizing everything around them, because there's a lot of moves that you can make that aren't the same as going out and buying another property or doing a cost seg that's already inside that you're just missing.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. And then, like you said, investing in your education and your network, right? Your mindset, your skills, and your network. Those are the 3 major things that you're going to need to be successful at anything, really.
Yeah. So give us the name of the book again. That's a Bigger Pockets book as well. Money for Tomorrow, right? Money for Tomorrow, How to Build and Protect Generational Wealth. Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. And I think that's your talk at BPCon in Cancun. That was on that, right?
Yeah, it was over so the book's broken up into 4 phases, creating wealth, which isn't, what people think. I mean, a lot in creating wealth is about getting your systems in place to actually figure out what you have and how to optimize that. Then we talk about how to keep wealth, how to grow it. And here's where most investors love focusing on the grow and they ignore all the other areas. And at Bigger Pockets, if you were there, we talked a lot about how to pass wealth on. Yeah. And beyond wills and trusts and stuff like that, all those cool things that you need to have in place. When I read that in the description, that's why I came. And my dad was a wills and estates attorney, and I'm, my kids are 23 and 21. So I was like, I need more tips on this. And it was really helpful. So where's the best place for people to find you and to get in touch with you to get the best information about what you're doing and the projects that you're involved in? Yeah. So I have 2 places you can go. If you're looking to invest in passive investments, if you're ready to diversify your portfolio, you can find me at passiveinvestingwithwhitney.com. If you're looking for one-on-one help to scale, you can find me at ashwealth.com. Awesome. And you have a YouTube channel as well, where, as a lot of us, we're just giving away our stuff for free. YouTube's amazing to just be able to make a video for someone and them see. And I also like that about podcasts. We can have this discussion. Somebody maybe didn't have the opportunity to come to BPCon and see you speak, and now they can just hear it while they're driving a random, road in Wichita, get this thing in their head, and maybe they have that light bulb moment, that we've both had, which, as we said, occurs every few years about how we have to adjust. I think that's just the best part of the technology advancements in this area. And sometimes you have to learn it 2 or 3 times.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's how I scaled. I downloaded Bigger Pockets podcast and would listen to it while I was running after work at night.
Yeah, I agree. It's amazing. Awesome. Well, I really appreciate having you on, and I hope I'll see you at one of these events in the next year.
Well, sounds great. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. That was Whitney Elkins-Hutten. You can find her again at ashwealth.com and passiveinvestingwithwhitney.com. I'm Jonathan Green. We'll see you next episode. Thanks for sticking around to the end so you can get a preview of who's coming up on episode 224 of Zen and the Art of Real Estate Investing. And it's guests, because it's 2 guests, Troy Zimmerman and Nate Shields of Missional Capital Group. What are we going to talk about? Syndications, creating real impact by passively investing in real estate. They're a real estate company that focuses on acquiring and managing commercial, multifamily, and retail assets for like-minded investors. We'll see you next episode with Troy and Nate.